this onslaught at lower prices, I'm pledging today that in my second term, we will eliminate a minimum of 10 old regulations for every one new regulation. We'll be able to do that quite easily, actually. And instead of attacking industries of the future, we will embrace them, including making America the world capital for crypto and Bitcoin.
What's going on, guys? K-Dub here with another episode of Crypto Zombie. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day today. So obviously today was the presidential inauguration for Donald Trump, and he did not make any mention about the Bitcoin strategic reserve, and we did see the price kind of start to come down. Then I was over on X, a lot of people saying that's it. It's the end of the bull run. This is the top. We're going to go down, and I'm going to give my 2 cents on that because if you guys had been following the channel for a while, we had mentioned specifically that it was probably not going to actually be very likely to make a strategic reserve on the first day, saying, from day one, I'm going to do this. I feel like it's more of just an expression, although to actually be getting bearish is a little bit crazy, and I'll show you a few reasons why, but I will talk about, sort of what happened today. I still expect big things. In fact, I know personally there are big things coming. I speak to people in crypto that deal with politics as well, which we'll get to. But just having a look at this monthly candle, we put in a new Bitcoin all-time high this morning, literally, like Crown pointed out. Massive bullish engulfing candle, and really you'd have to get back down around 96,000 for this to, start even looking a little bit scary, right? And if you have a look at just the long-term holder NUPL, just on these cycles alone, forget about what you saw today, with the presidency, just look at these areas where we tend to get overheated, getting above that sort of 0.9 area. You could see we've only literally just entered the area right now, which is suggesting that, yes, potentially, we could be getting towards the top, right? But we're not seeing that as far as any of these signals are concerned. If you really have a look at what we were doing, it is still pretty constructive as far as the structure goes. Technically, we did put in this lower low, but what we were doing was we were forming this giant ascending channel, right? And what we had was a bit of a fake out down here, and we've had four straight days of turning this resistance, this downward resistance right here, okay, into actual support right here. And where did we get held down? Well, just conveniently at the previous heart line, right? You can see right here. But the most important thing is that we've actually broke the downtrend and we put in a new all-time high. So, you're probably going to have a lot of emotions. Trump coin came out. I don't know if you guys bought any of that. I was late to the party, but I did manage to get a 3X. I did sell out of my position because I just don't like holding meme coins, but be careful with, chasing all these pumps and all this other stuff. But I do just want to talk about what's going on specifically. Of course, we had mentioned, okay, that there is still a CME futures gap at around this sort of 81,000 area. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to go down there, right? I mean, this was pretty impressive, actually virtual, like a double bottom right here, right? And we did break that downtrend and perfectly retest it. So as far as I'm concerned, you still have the lower, the middle, and the higher moving average. You have the 200, 150 all moving to the upside. So we don't have to close the CME futures gap. I wasn't trying to get bearish. I was saying it's a possibility. But again, if we have a little bit of sideways choppy action leading into, this first quarter of the year, just because Trump didn't make a strategic reserve on day one, which is a ridiculous thing really to request if you think about it. I mean, I'm sure the guy has a lot of other things he needs to be worrying about. And I know that Bitcoin is, arguably the most important thing, let's say for me or for some people watching, maybe for the entire United States. It's not exactly priority number one, but I do have full faith that we will see it come to fruition. And again, if we don't, which I don't think is going to happen, don't forget that it is the United States of America. So on a state level, you still have that ability to buy Bitcoin on the behalf of your local government, right? So that is still something that a lot of people are not really understanding. They're looking at the federal level, but it takes time, right? These things take time. So a lot I want to go over today. There's been a few days. Obviously, I've been around. Friendly reminder, though, we only have less than a day left for the $200,000 whale challenge over on Blowfin. They also are giving away an iPhone 16. This is only running for 2 more days. So if you want to check that out, use the link below in the description. And I'm actually pretty excited to say that the Femex $30,000 bonus is back. So we were running this for a while last year. It's back now. So if you do the requirements, you can read it when you sign up, or if you're already registered, you're technically already able to get involved in that. So you can get up to 30,000 with trading volumes, et cetera, and stuff like that. So I just want to point that out. Again, all of that will be below in the description, guys. And, you know, of course, Meta Signals, if you guys are interested, they're still doing their thing over there. You can join the Discord for free. And if you like what you see, well, consider grabbing an NFT. So I think what I'm going to do is well, by the way, I just want to show you the Bitcoin versus gold chart also tapped its previous high, right? So, I mean, still, for all these people that are saying, oh, Bitcoin is garbage, gold is better, I mean, Bitcoin is still kind of technically outperforming gold, give or take the fact that today it's down about 5 to 6%, but I wouldn't really consider that a massive loss when you look at the history, right? So let's talk about what is going on though, right? The US spot Bitcoin ETFs were approved over, about a year ago, give or take roughly. It went on to become the most successful ETF launch in history. People tend to forget this, right? You have NASDAQ proposing a rule change to the SEC to increase position and exercise limits for iShares Bitcoin ETF IBIT options from 25K to 250K contracts, right? So again, if there is no demand, if there's no interest in it, why are you seeing all of these talks? And yes, it is, I suppose, disappointing for some people that we didn't get a strategic reserve on day one, but we have 4 years to go. And I think that's a little ridiculous. Like, I've even seen some like OG Bitcoiners like extremely depressed about this. And I mean, I don't know. Comment below, but it just doesn't faze me. I mean, I don't see it as an issue. Bitcoin is in an extremely constructive pattern, and even if we were to have a breakdown and fill the CME futures gap for some crazy reason, I still take that as an opportunity to accumulate. Once we start getting into those really overheated levels, then I will let you guys know. I mean, if you've been holding Bitcoin since like 20K or whatever, and you want to take some chips off the table, there's nothing wrong with that. But to straight up say that because we didn't get a reserve on day one, that's the end of the bull cycle, I mean, that's a little emotional, in my opinion. That's a little emotional. And people are talking about, they thought the Biden administration was going to sell the Bitcoin, on the exchanges. But, last year, 379 billion entered the market based on realized cap, roughly 1 billion per day. If the US government was going to sell 6.5 billion, that would probably be absorbed in a week, okay? So don't, again, let all of this FUD, there was Tether FUD that came out, just ignore the noise. All of this stuff that happens is literally designed to play with your emotions. You're supposed to FOMO into the meme coin at the top, and you're supposed to sell your crypto at the bottom, right? That's what they do, and that's not what I want to do on this channel. That's not what we talk about, right? We try to take a level-headed approach and realize that statistically, according to what we looked at, the charts that we've been looking at for 8 years on this channel, if I didn't know what was going on in the news, there's no reason not to be bullish. And if we do get 20% corrections, I think that we're still going higher and these are still opportunities for buying. But, again, not financial advice. That's up to you guys. We had seen that retail was actually flowing out. It had dropped about 21.7%. And what's crazy is just in the past week, now how to buy crypto literally at an all-time high on Google Trends. So there is obviously that interest coming back. It is a little scary when you see the meme coins starting to pump, that's usually when things are getting a little bit greedy, but I would not call this full on like greed mania. When you start seeing altcoins pumping 60% in a day, 30 to 60 to 80%. And I'm not talking about just the handful of altcoins that nobody heard of, the meme coins that, you always hear about the guy who did the 100 or 1000X. You never hear about the guy who lost 2,000, lost $5,000, lost everything, right? Because nobody cares about that, right? They only care about that one time one person did well, when in reality, most people lose out on this, which is why the strategy that I promote is just dollar cost averaging Bitcoin, or I do believe in like lower leverage. Like if you guys want to use some of the exchanges that I talk about, 2x, 3x, that's pretty safe. Generally you're not going to have more than a 30% correction unless you're in some serious, bad situation. And, you can hedge that way as well. You could short, although I wouldn't recommend it. But, you can see regardless, the corporate demand for Bitcoin is outpacing the new Bitcoin supply this year. I mean, everybody's bearish right now because everyone's bearish because the president didn't talk about Bitcoin, and Bitcoin fell from literally this morning, an all-time high of 109 down to like the low hundreds. Again, we still have a Bitcoin that's over $100,000 at the time of making this video. Maybe by the time you watch, we're back in the 90s. But my point is like, if it was that devastating, a 6% correction from the top, That's a pretty average day for Bitcoin. That's a pretty normal move for Bitcoin, right? And don't forget that if you just look at the ownership distribution right now, it is still primarily almost 70% in the individuals, right? Satoshi having about 4.6, 5.8 to be mined. Funds only have about 6%. Lost Bitcoin is about 7.5, and businesses only 4%. So there's a lot of catching up to do for these ETFs, these businesses, the governments, the possible sovereign wealth funds. So, just remember, when you're selling your Bitcoin, because, this is us, the normies over here. When we're selling, who are we selling to? That's the question. And they know that we had the opportunity to front run them, right? And that's why you have these people coming out like Cynthia Loomis from Wyoming, who, by the way, did meet with Donald Trump. So it's not like they're not talking about it just because they didn't mention it today. Like I said, I'm not even remotely fazed by this, but she even encourages people to save in Bitcoin because it's a much better solution.
I encourage people to buy and hold. I encourage them to save Bitcoin for their retirement, for their future. And that's because as the Congress spends trillions and trillions of dollars and is flooding our economy and the world economy with US dollars, there's no way that we cannot debase the value of the US dollars.
And again, I'm not saying that we're due for a massive correction, although if you go on X, everyone's saying it's over. I'm not saying that because I don't feel that. I don't see that. But, like Rec Capital pointed out, when you do get these price discoveries, sometimes you get these corrections, right? But they do diminish over time. When we broke the all-time high in 2013, we had a 75% correction. That was 13 weeks. In 2017, we had a 34%. In 21, a 31%. And then this year, around a 15%. So you can see that there are these corrections. There is profit taking. Not everyone is a HODL till the death believer, right? So it is very normal to see these fluctuations in markets, but that's where those opportunities arise. When you're panicking and you're freaking out and you're thinking to yourself like, man, I really screwed up. I bought Bitcoin at 102 and it just fell to 89. Oh my God, what should I do? The more you're in crypto, the more you buy Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin and understand it, the less you're going to get scared and the more you're going to get excited, right? But obviously, if you are new to the space, which a lot of you aren't, I think a lot of you are OGs. I see a lot of the same comments, but there are some new people. So, don't panic over stuff like that. For example, here's some things. You have the state of New Hampshire looking to introduce their Bitcoin strategic reserve, okay? This isn't on a federal level. This is on a state level. You also have the largest Italian bank, Intesa San Paolo, purchasing 11 Bitcoin and also speaking about how they should possibly add more to their reserves. You have Hong Kong-based Minxin Group, plastering and bricklaying works company, purchasing 500 Bitcoin. So slowly, right? And then all at once, right? So I know everybody wants, the Bitcoin $1 million tomorrow. We want 1 million Bitcoin in the US strategic reserve. That's not how things work, right? But it is funny how this morning Bitcoin put in a brand new all-time high, and yet no one's talking about the fact that we put in an all-time high. They're only talking about the fact that we dumped during the inauguration. I don't get it. It's like, anyway, another thing that we have is, I don't know, this is actually a little bit of older news, but, Facebook, they changed their name to Meta. They are even proposing potentially adding Bitcoin to their treasuries by their shareholders. Now, of course, these are things that are not going to happen immediately overnight, but this is where it gets going, right? It's like an avalanche. It starts with a bird that lands on a branch, and then a little bit of snow falls, and then it tumbles and tumbles. The next thing you know, it's just the whole mountain, right? We're really just at the beginning of, said avalanche per se, right? We're not exactly there just yet, but we're farther than we've ever been. Now, the big news that you may have heard of, and this is very personal to me, is that Florida is saying that the deal is essentially sealed because Samuel Arms, which, by the way, I know this guy, he lives relatively close to me. We've met and hung out before, and he's had 12 meetings to push a Bitcoin strategic reserve in Florida, and he thinks that Florida will be the first state to do it. So again, maybe they're not going to do it on the federal level, but the same way that globally, I don't know if I'll get demonetized. I'm already demonetized anyway, but you know what I'm saying, the puff pass industry, right? You know how on a federal level, that's illegal technically, but for example, New York State, you can go in, they have places you could buy it with cash. In Florida, it's not legal, but trust me, nobody cares. I mean, people are literally doing it all the time, but federally it's not, right? So sometimes the states have to plant those seeds first before you'll see the federal jump in. I think if Florida is able to get that Bitcoin strategic reserve, which, like I said, my buddy Samuel, he seems to be pretty confident on this. In fact, if you guys don't believe this, I can probably get him on the show for a couple minutes to just talk about it. I'm actually positive he would do that. He'd probably love to do that. But I guarantee you, I've spoke to him and they're very serious about it. So don't be surprised if Florida, and then potentially I've heard rumblings of maybe Texas being the next state. And then once they all start catching on, maybe that's when the strategic federal Bitcoin reserve, gets kind of pushed more to the front. Right now, they're worried about the border. There's a lot of other things that more people are worried about. So I wouldn't freak out over it. I mean, you even have the former Prime Minister of the UK saying that she's a supporter of Bitcoin and that she thinks it's a good thing.
I mean, I am a supporter of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. I think they're a good thing. I think they help take power away from central banks. So in that respect, they're a good thing. I'm very, very worried about anything like a central bank digital currency.
I completely
which will,
agree.
I think, give the state huge amounts of power. And what we know is overweening state power is not a good thing.
And it's not like Donald Trump hasn't commented on it before. He is very forward thinking when it comes to these new emerging technologies. He's talked about AI, he's talked about Bitcoin, and he has been very vocal about this.
This onslaught at lower prices, I'm pledging today that in my second term, we will eliminate a minimum of 10 old regulations for every one new regulation. We'll be able to do that quite easily, actually. And instead of attacking industries of the future, we will embrace them, including making America the world capital for crypto and Bitcoin.
I mean, some other people in the space, whether you like them, whether you hate them, I'm indifferent. I'm cool with everybody in crypto. Obviously, I'm Bitcoin pretty much only, but hey, you do you. Charles Hoskinson, he even said that Donald Trump is creating a 24-person crypto council looking to shape the digital future. And I believe he's going to be part of it.
Anytime there's a presidential transition, it's a very complex affair. And actually, the Treasury Secretary has yet to be selected, and they're kind of winnowing down. So that sets all crypto policy. So right now, most of the discussions are with the legislative branch. I'm having dinner tomorrow with Senator Scott. I've talked to numerous senators who are in the banking sector, basically figuring out how the regulation is going to work. And we've had some discussions with people transition team about what they want to do with a crypto committee. And if it's going to be a czar or if it's a commission, and what exact powers and how exactly does that work? And it's not exactly clear in how it's set up on the executive side, but on the legislative side, it's very clear what they want is to pass a law. So there were several attempts already in 2023. FIT 21 was the most successful, which passed the House, but it did not enter the Senate. And in the Senate, there was a bill in 2022 called FIA that was by Senator Lummis and Senator Gillibrand. So right now, there's some reconciliation of what does the executive branch want, what does the legislative branch want. What we've been told by the executive branch is Trump has a mandate that he wants America to be the #1 place to found and run a cryptocurrency business. There were also several campaign promises they're trying to connect to. For example, the strategic reserve for Bitcoin concept that also Senator Lummis is a big fan of. And there's a lot of things around asset classification that have to get resolved. The security commodity debate and what power should be reserved for the CFTC and the SEC. So it's still very early days, and we'll know a lot more in 60 to 90 days about how much level of broad industry participation is going to occur at the executive branch side. But we're already in talks with many people on the legislative side, and they're going to move forward as a co-equal branch of government with or without the executive branch to pass a law.
Not to mention the fact that all these naysayers, remember Mark Cuban said he would rather buy a banana than Bitcoin, now says he'd rather own Bitcoin than gold if something bad happened to the economy. I think it has more value. Flip-flopping all over the place, right? The same thing with Kevin O'Leary. He hated it 5 years ago. Now he loves it all of a sudden. I mean, actually, Trump hated Bitcoin. Remember when he had that tweet that he was like, I don't agree with Bitcoin. I think it's nothing but thin air. Remember that? So it happens, right? First you have the naysayers, the disbelievers, the people who don't understand. But what happens is once you get that orange pill, once you understand that saving in a traditional bank, stuffing cash underneath a mattress, you're never going to break the chains of this financial slavery, and you're going to continue to lose purchasing power with your inflation. And you can argue that maybe on a day-to-day basis, Bitcoin isn't a good inflation hedge, like essentially like, a hedge against inflation like in a month or in a week or so or in a quarter. But over the course of the years, it's been appreciating on average, I believe, like between 40 and 60%. So, and actually, if you look historically, Bitcoin has 3 good years and then 1 bad year, right? We already had a bad year. We are now on the 3rd good year. So that would suggest that sometime maybe by the end of this year, middle, depending if it goes a little bit too high, too fast, then yeah, we might go into a bear market in 2026, but a bear market from what level? You know, if Bitcoin goes up to 180 or 250 and then crashes back down to 90, okay, so we just get to buy around 90. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's not that big of a deal. Everybody always looks at the tops, the 10,000s, the 20s, the 69, the 100s. Look at the bottoms, right? Look at the bottoms. 2013, we had 200. Then we had 3,600. Then we had 15,000. We don't know where the next bottom is, but it's slowly climbing. It's progressively going up and to the right. And like Michael Saylor said, Jerome Powell's right. Bitcoin is competing with gold, and you should sell your gold. Gold is getting demonetized. Gold is a crappy settlement network.
Jerome Powell is totally right. It is competing with gold. You should sell your gold. Gold is going to get demonetized. Gold is a crappy settlement network. How do you move $10 billion of gold in an hour from here to Tokyo? By the way, as an aside, the Spanish Empire peaked in the 16th century. 2 reasons. The gold settlement network failed. They wanted to send gold from Spain to the Netherlands to pay the Spanish army to fight to hold the Netherlands for the Spanish king. And the fleet carrying the gold got washed into a port. They got swept into a British port and a harbor, and she stole it. She's like, I'm not sending it. You're my enemy. So the settlement network failed, and she intercepted all the money, and she bankrupted the Spanish army in the Netherlands. Second point, the Spanish had hyperinflation in the 16th century. Why? Because they brought back too much gold. They discovered all this gold. Great. Well, what does that mean? Bam. Every single local economy collapsed. Prices went through the roof. The Spanish Empire peaked when they found the gold. So takeaway, gold's not that good as money.
I think another thing too that we have to realize is that the generations that hold most of the wealth right now are pretty much the baby boomers. I guess you could say like the Generation Xers, but really like my generation, the millennials, right? We're kind of starting to inherit that next, wealth transfer, and the Gen Zs. You could see 17, oh boy, what is this, trillion? Million, billion, yeah, 17 is a big number. 17 trillion in equity is leaving baby boomers' hands in a massive wealth transfer. Now, when my generation or Generation Z or these whatever newer generations, we're living in the digital world. We don't trust the news. We don't trust the government. We don't trust the banks, right? What do you think we're going to be doing with our money? I would say that, I'm not going to say it's 100% or not even 50%, but you don't think 20%, maybe 20% are going to maybe look into crypto, maybe look into Bitcoin? I would certainly say that that is possibility to be the case. I mean, like Douglas A. Bonaparte pointed out, there's 7 trillion just sitting in money market funds right now. What should we do with all this cash? I don't know. Maybe buy some Bitcoin, right? Some of these boomers, they're going to start selling their real estate, right? These properties that have appreciated in value. They sell a building for $8 million. You don't think they might consider maybe 500 to a million, maybe put like 10%, 5% even into Bitcoin? Now that you got companies allocating 1% to 3%, some of them up to 8%. And I think that number is only going to grow over time. That's why I'm saying I wouldn't freak out. Not to mention the fact that, as far as this is like one of those weird, like political, everybody could have an opinion on this, but let's be honest, guys. You have crypto giants that are backing Trump with millions. You have Circle, Coinbase, Ripple, Kraken, Ondo Finance, okay? So, obviously he's seeing the support from the crypto industry. And just to say, like Tom Lee, I don't know if you follow him, he thinks Bitcoin is going to 250,000 this year.
For those folks who are watching who are not in Bitcoin or are thinking about buying Bitcoin at these prices, are you saying that this is a fair and good price to get in, or are you saying wait because you think it's going farther down?
Bitcoin is something you need to be long-term focused. I don't think anyone's going to lose money buying here at 90. If they're trying to time this, maybe they'll get lucky and it goes to 70. But to me, Bitcoin could be significantly higher this year, maybe 200, 250. So I think 90 is still a good entry point.
Now, Tom Lee is known for being a bit of a permabull. I will give him that much. But I will say that I was watching Tom Lee, back in 2017, 18, 19, etc. And here's a clip where he says to buy Bitcoin at $5,000. And CNBC's Becky was like, are you really suggesting that people buy Bitcoin at $5,000? Don't you think that's a little irresponsible?
Do you actually think it's undervalued by that extent?
We think the best approach for most people is just to put 1% or 2%.
Are you saying that? I get that if you're somebody who's got a lot of assets, I still think it's crazy. But for a retail investor, somebody who's saving for retirement and putting that aside, that seems crazy to me.
Well, it's basically the idea that you can afford to lose 1% if that's 1% of your portfolio.
That's crazy. You might as well throw it away on high fees to an investor, to an average. Like this, you're taking a flyer on that. You don't know where it's going to go or what's going to happen.
Well, in a way, that's right, Becky. That for the majority of people, it's 1% is like a small risk bet. But Bitcoin makes all of its gains in 10 days in a year. You gotta essentially hold it or hodl it, as they say, to really capture the gains.
Well, in hindsight, was it irresponsible? Wouldn't that have been a great decision to listen to that, to go against the herd, to not listen to, the pushback, the naysayers, the FUD, right? And, not to get on the prices of the tokens, but I mean, Ethereum hasn't even broken its all-time high. I don't really look at the ETH chart a lot. I think Bitcoin has just been one of the best performers, unless you were able to get into one of these random meme coins early. But really, without that, Bitcoin has kind of been the place to be. And also, if you just point this out, we're following a very similar trajectory as the previous cycles. You have these fake outs, these crashes, right? This is very, very typical. We're still in this upwards parallel channel, like I've kind of showed you as well, which actually at this point, what is he saying? Yeah, like 150K-ish. He says maybe 300, or in Saylor's case, 13 million.
Bitcoin's 0.1% of the capital in the world right now. I think it's going to go to 7% of the capital.
7%.
My long-term forecast is it's going to go to 13 million over 21 years.
13 million.
13 million. But what is it 5 years from now? You're in your 4-year calculus.
It's been growing 44% a year with about a 40 to 50 vol. I would think it'll move on at 40%, then click down to 35, then 30, then 25. And at some point, it'll be the S&P return plus 8%, and it'll be the S&P vol plus 8%, because it's always going to be a more global, open, free capital market.
And we always look at the charts logarithmically because it's a lot easier, but if you put it back to linear, you really start to understand that last explosive stage. So you always have these consolidation zones right before you have the banana zone, as they put it. And granted, yes, this is a little bit older. We have come back up to the top of this, but we're still only in this box, basically just hanging out in this area. We still haven't even entered, into that crazy parabolic mania phase yet, still holding this Metcalfe's law curve quite well. And, if you want a really bullish prediction, $850,000 according to Bitwise.
There's so much to do in crypto. It's such an expansive space, super innovative, as Matt mentioned. But I do think that this new trend of more evolved products entering the market will usher in new capital. And I think that's going to bring a lot of new investors in. This is the type of maturation that happens in other asset classes as they grow. And we're just seeing that same thing play out with Bitcoin, with crypto, which is a growing asset class that we're super excited for. As far as price predictions go from Bitwise, we really expect the price of Bitcoin to double next year. Eventually, it says here on the screen in 2029 that Bitcoin will overtake the $18 trillion gold market and trade above 1 million per Bitcoin. Now, that's not a 2025 prediction, but we expect that to happen in 2029. And if Donald Trump and the U.S. government or other major governments around the world start buying Bitcoin, which is seeming more and more possible every day, we think we'll hit 1 million much, much sooner.
All right, so just to talk about some quick TA real quick to show you guys what's going on. So we started putting in this downwards channel, right? And we were respecting it pretty well. We had this downwards sloping support here, and we had this as resistance. And if you see what this and yes, we do still have a CME futures gap down here. So, are we going to fill it, guys? I don't know. It's possible. I was just pointing it out. I wasn't saying it had to happen. I just was saying if we went down to 81,000, oh, I'm sorry. Actually, we'd have to go to around 77 to actually officially close it. But what's $2,000 among friends? But, we might not close it. I mean, there's only about a 96% chance of closing it. That's a pretty high percentage, but it's, the weatherman can say there's a 90% chance of rain and it doesn't rain and nobody gets mad at him, right? So you could see that we did have a retest right here. Now, this is a very, very indecisive candle, This is a very volatile candle. In fact, they call this the Darth Maul, because you get the wicks to the top, you get the wicks to the bottom. A lot of people get shaked out in their positions. So, obviously we will keep an eye on that. But for the most part, as far as I'm concerned, we have broken out of the downtrend. We do have actually right here, I don't know if you see on this, what do you call it? I can't think of it right now, the market cipher, we have a bit of a double bottom right here. So it's not a full-on anchor trigger wave just yet, but it does look like it's putting in a double bottom. So what I would want to see is something like this, maybe have one more dip, you know, come like that. And then what you would do is you would put in that trigger wave to that point. But of course, that could mean that in the meantime, there could be a little bit of a flush, a little bit of some crazy volatility to get people freaked out. But if we do look at just simply this channel that we've been in since basically August of 2022, from this point, and obviously we're not going to go straight up, but let's just do this because it's simple math. You know, with a 25% move, that could easily put Bitcoin at $130,000 without doing anything too extreme within this very basic pattern that we've been following. And if you want to zoom out and look at the big guy going all the way back to May of 2017, well, that gives us a possibility of coming all the way up here. And again, we're not going to go straight up, but just for simple math, you know, that's about 185% increase to a possible $270,000 Bitcoin. Now, you know, let's take it with a grain of salt. Obviously, our next level on the 1.618 is only 135. Our level to retrace is 90, followed by 81. Okay, so after that, I would probably say that unless we had a crazy wick and you had your buy orders in, you're probably not going to be able to buy Bitcoin at like 75,000. If you do, it might be just for a couple of hours. I wouldn't expect it to stay there personally, because we've entered the phase in which you have this constructive pattern on the EMAs in which they all have the bullishness to the upside. You have the highest leading to the lowest, right? You don't want something like this where they're crossing over. You don't want something like this where they're out of order, right? You want this right here where every single moving average is in order. And you can see that these moving averages are helping, right? When we're in a strong uptrend, the 21 is holding it. When we lose that, that's when the 50 comes into play, right? So as these continue to move to the upside, you know, God forbid, let's say, you know, we lose this, we come down, that's generally where you have that continued pattern, and then you're probably going to still have, I know these drawings are really sloppy, but you guys know what I mean. You basically understand the point that I'm trying to make. And, you know, again, if we just have a look at these charts, we tend to have, except for the first year, we have 1 red, 3 green, 1 red, 3 green, 1 red. And currently, we still are technically having a bullish year, right? Because we opened the year at 93,000. And we're currently at like 102, 103. So far, it still is a relatively bullish Q1. So that's it for me today, guys. Thank you for coming back to the channel. I kind of just felt like, I know I don't make a lot of videos, but I wanted to make a video after the Trump inauguration and the lack of speaking about Bitcoin and the immense disappointment that everyone was talking about, which if you go back and watch my videos, I said the likelihood of them doing this on day one, regardless of what they promise, right? You know, at the end of the day, politicians are politicians, right? You know, it doesn't matter if you're pro this guy or pro that guy, they're all just going to say stuff, right? I do believe that it's going to happen, but I definitely had my doubts as far as it happening on the first day. You know, take a breather. We got 4 years with this dude. We got Florida possibly coming out with it, Texas following next, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, there's a couple other too. So, you know, once it starts to get that trickle down effect, then you'll start to see it. I think right now maybe they're just focused on some other things, but I'm just saying this again, not financial advice. If you guys do see any kind of major dips, like we go down and we get that 78 to close the gap, it might not happen, but I think the dips are for buying, and I believe that they're for accumulation right now. And when we get to the overheated levels, I will be the first one to let you guys know. I don't want you to get burned. You know, if you're a long-term holder, just hold. But if you really need that money and you're overextended, well, that's something you need to talk to yourself about. But long-term, Bitcoin's going to $1 million. It's happening. It's only a 10x from where we're at, guys. It's not that hard. Short-term, yeah, things could get crazy. But everybody says, man, I wish I could have bought lower. We get a chance down at 88. And what do? They panic sell, right? So human emotions are never going to change. So thanks again, guys. Get subscribed, drop a like, drop a comment if you want. You can check out these tutorials popping up right here, right now. Yeah, Femex, I don't know how long they're going to be running that $30,000 bonus for. They usually only do that once a year. They are running that right now. And they are a non-KYC exchange, and they do have a $50,000 limit, Blowfin as well, Meta Signals. And yeah, I think that's about it, guys. So until next time, I love you, stay crypto, and of course, peace out.